Hello and welcome back to my channel, or if you're new, welcome. I'm so happy you're here. My name's Hannah and on this channel I post a lot of videos about anti-MLM. All those videos can be found linked in a playlist here and down below. But if you're really into these horror stories in particular, there are smaller playlists on my channel broken down by type of video as well. I upload new videos every single week, so I would love it if you would consider subscribing and sticking around. Today, as I'm sure you know, is another MLM horror stories video, and these are the experiences that people have had with MLM companies. They write out their story, they send it to me, and I pick out a few for a video. I love getting new stories, so if you have your own that you would like to have considered for a video, you can check out the description box for instructions on how to send that my way. So with that, let's read some stories today. This one says, I just want to apologize in advance for the potential length of this story, but it's important since it points out the predatory tactics MLMs tend to use over and over, and my story spans over several years. When my husband and I moved from California all the way to North Dakota so that we could both go back to school, we moved into a house near a dog park where we would frequent several times a week. He was going to a top aviation school in the area, and I was thinking about going back myself. About a month into living in the area, we met a couple at this dog park and began chatting with them. They were very friendly, and by the end of our meeting, we exchanged numbers. Awesome, new couple friends, we thought. Shortly after, my husband was invited over to hang out with the other husband counterpart, and when he came home, he informed me that the guy pitched him some sort of business deal we now know to be Amway. He told him he wasn't interested, and we never heard from them again. Also, just an aside, it turns out that they didn't even have a dog and they were just watching a friend's dog. My theory now is that they borrowed someone's dog to try and find unsuspecting victims to pitch to. Fast forward a couple years later, I was shopping in a TJ Maxx when a woman and I began talking about hair products, which moved into finding out that our husbands had both been in the military, etc. She was a yoga instructor, and at the time I was taking yoga classes 1 to 2 times a week, and we realized that we had a lot in common. I had been going through a hard time connecting with people in the area and was in serious need of friends, so I was extremely excited about meeting someone. We exchanged numbers, and the next day she invited me to coffee. We had coffee a week later, and I was convinced I had met a new friend. She told me that she works for a marketing company in addition to yoga instruction, and I had expressed that I used to intern for a brand journalist and was now in college to finish my degree in English. Later that week, she told me she had a business proposition for me and wanted my husband and I to meet up with her and so, who I had assumed was her husband, for a business proposition. Because I had background experience in content marketing and yoga, I assumed that she wanted me to help her market her yoga business on top of having a couples date. I could not have been more wrong. When we met at the restaurant, she came by herself and barely looked at me or spoke as we waited for the other person, who I found out in that moment was not her husband. This suddenly felt very weird. When the other person got there, he was very friendly, and the woman I had met continued to barely say anything and would not even look at me. My husband and I ordered food, and the woman and the man said that they were not going to order anything. This was ridiculous. Why invite us to a restaurant around dinner time and not order dinner? What was going on? When our food came, the man whipped out a tablet and began his pitch. It was literally a PowerPoint presentation, and he was trying to get us to buy into Amway. At one point, he was describing the pay model, which was visually set up as a pyramid. My lovely husband goes, "Oh, so it's a pyramid scheme." I was mortified, and the man laughed and insisted that it was different, to which my husband respectfully said he didn't see how. It was all very awkward and disappointing. I felt so dumb for thinking that this woman wanted to be my friend. After they were finished, we said that we would think about it and left, knowing full well that it was a hard no for us. Still hoping that I could be friends with this girl, about a month later at an outdoor yoga event, I saw the same woman was instructing one of the sessions. I decided to go up to her afterwards to say hi, but when I did, she looked at me like I was an idiot, barely said hi to me, and continued on her way. It was in that moment that I realized that we were never going to be friends, and it still angers me to this day. Yeah, that would anger me too, because in that moment, it's made very clear to you what her intentions were. And this is just another example of something we see all the time of people in MLMs making an effort to get to know you, to talk to you, to chat with you, to invite you out. And then the second that you're not interested in what they have to offer, you're cut off. It's like you don't exist to them anymore. It's just so frustrating and hurtful. Like, you think you're making a new adult friend and they toss you to the side and make you feel like you're nothing if they can't make some money off of you by way of you joining their Amway team or something. It's like, oh, okay, the pitch didn't work on this person, toss them to the side, on to the next. It just sucks. That sucks to be on the receiving end of that kind of treatment. I think this encounter set me up to react very poorly when the same tactic was used on me again in 2020. Another woman in a store struck up a conversation with me for a few minutes and then asked for my number to connect later. A week later, she texted me saying that she had a business opportunity for me, and I point blank asked her if it was Amway. I said that if it was, then I was not interested, and I was tired of people pretending to want to be friends with me just to get me into their pyramid scheme. What ensued was a lot of back and forth debate. She accused me of being rude, and I accused her and those like her of being predatory scam artists. Not my best moment, I know. I told her that what she does hurts people. She claimed to be working with very hardworking people, and they were able to successfully make $20,000 to $50,000 a year, to which I responded that they did so by scamming people. I was a GTA at the time and was literally using cults and scams like MLMs as a writing topic for my course, as were other GTAs. She told me she felt bad for my students, and I told her I was extremely happy that I could prepare them for rejecting offers from people like her. I truly wish I had saved these exchanges because I would have included them. I was furious, hurt, and felt extremely jaded. These people are preying on women and men under the guise of friendship to rope them into a pyramid scheme for their own benefit. I just don't get how they cannot see or care about how they are affecting and hurting others. Since then, I've been approached by 3 other women in stores who I am certain are other Amway predators. This is what I like to call them anyway. And I'm friendly, but get away as soon as I can. They are easy to spot since they are typically the only people striking up random conversations with strangers in a store and are often not buying anything. Thanks for this space to vent and share our experiences. You are doing the Lord's work. And thank you to everybody viewing for being tolerant of my cat just interjecting himself whenever he feels necessary. He gets all up in the camera and like rubs his face all over it and stuff. He did that a few videos back where he got really close to the camera and I was like, Zeke, the camera's not for you, buddy. And I kind of pulled him away. I got so many comments of people being like, Hannah, the camera is for Zeke. Stop lying. Stop spreading misinformation. So now I'm just letting him do his thing. Apologies if it's distracting. It would be more distracting if I tried to keep him out of the room. Sometimes it's just easier not to battle him and just let him come and go as he pleases. So anyway, thank you for your patience with that. Thank you for writing in this story and for being yet another example of somebody who was made to believe that they were making a new friend and then they had to come to that realization that that person approaching you in the store doesn't care about you really at all. They just have some kind of money motive. And I can understand how that would make you feel jaded. And the second time it happens to you and you realize what's happening and you call her out on it, you're not going to be as nice as you were the first time because you've already been there, already done that. You've already wasted your time meeting up with somebody at a restaurant. So the moment you sniff it out with this second person, you call her out on it. I can't blame you for that. Honestly, at some point, you just got to stick up for yourself. I just received so many stories of people reporting that they were approached in a store. And with how many reports I've received of this kind of situation, I feel jaded when I go out in public and I automatically kind of have that guard up if somebody does come up to me to try and strike up a conversation. It doesn't happen very often, but when it does, I immediately put up that wall of like, what do you want? Because I've heard of this happening so many times, particularly when you're in a store or when you're out in public. If somebody approaches you, specifically if they approach you with some kind of compliment, that seems to be the trend. That seems to be the way that they kind of break down your guard a little bit. And just socially, it would be rude for somebody to compliment you and for you to ignore them or for you to not engage in that conversation or say thank you or something. I feel like that's kind of their way of trapping you into that interaction. So I don't know, I guess just a PSA, if you're out in public, specifically if you're a woman and you're by yourself and somebody approaches you who doesn't look to be shopping themselves, maybe who opens with a compliment or who seems to be overly friendly or something, I guess that might be a cause for concern. And that's a bummer to say, isn't it? It shouldn't be that way. We shouldn't be looking at people with a skeptical eye and like wondering what they want and how they're gonna scam you when they approach you with a nice conversation. That sucks. But that's kind of the lesson I've learned with reading these horror stories. And it might be worth your while if you can to suss out their intention right then and there rather than exchanging contact information, texting, calling each other, meeting up, because all of that is going to ultimately be wasted time if their end goal is going to be to get you into their MLM, right? I don't know. I hate that that's my piece of advice right here, that we should be skeptical of people who are kind to you in public. Like, I don't know. Just use your best judgment, particularly if they start to use language like they're a business owner or an entrepreneur or they have mentors. All these kinds of things heavily signal MLM. This story says, hey Hannah, first off, I'd like to remain anonymous if that's okay. I've also submitted this story to you before, but I wrote it more like a Reddit post because I post there a lot. In this version, I cleaned it up to make it more YouTube friendly and to fit your channel style better. Thanks for reading. Thanks for doing that. I appreciate that. As as we know in Utah, MLMs are a dime a dozen here. Because of that, it's hard to trust a party invitation because there's a good chance it's actually a sales pitch. This was one such party. A now ex-friend of mine from college was getting married in the spring of 2011 and invited us to her bachelorette party at her house. She also lived with her mom. This is important later. We just assumed it would be a night of drinking, party games, and spicy bachelorette shenanigans, so we were pumped. The bride sent a group text to us saying, "Be sure to bring cash," but didn't say why. We assumed it was for a male performer coming over or we were going to go out somewhere. We all brought just enough for tips and drinks in singles and met at her house. Everything seemed normal at first. We started pre-gaming, fully expecting a performer to come to the door or a limo to arrive to take us to a club. There was a knock at the door, but instead of a scantily clad cop or firefighter, there was a girl in jeans and a nice top. The bride told us that she was a friend from high school. We assumed that she was just running late, so we introduced ourselves and tried to make her feel welcome. She also came in with a big suitcase on wheels. Maybe she just flew in and was staying at the bride's house for the wedding, right? Nope. Turns out she was a pure romance consultant, and in her suitcase was her party kit. She showed us her collection of samples, toys, and accessories, showing all their features and talking points. We had fun making jokes and talking about which ones we liked. The presentation ended after about an hour, and we all asked her for her business card so that we could order stuff from her later on. We told the bride this was a fun way to set the tone of the night and asked what club we were going to next. This is where things went sour. The bride suddenly got really angry and said that we all had to buy something that night because she was going to get a cut of the consultant's sales. We were in disbelief. I was 21 and broke as a joke at the time, so I only brought $20 in singles to get a drink at the club and throw a couple of bucks at a performer, not buy overpriced MLM products. Most of us were in the same boat and didn't bring more than $50. I felt shocked and embarrassed that I fell into a trap like this. The bride was notoriously cheap, cutting corners all over the place to reduce the cost of her wedding, but none of us thought she was low enough that she would extort her friends. Bride had the biggest tantrum I've ever seen an adult have, and the consultant looked like her soul left her body. We asked the consultant if it was possible to retroactively give the bride her cut if we ordered later, and unfortunately Pure Romance's policy was that it was only for purchases at the party. She would have given the sales cut to the bride later on if she could, but Pure Romance didn't have a way that she could break that rule without getting in serious trouble with her uplines. Also at the time, Pure Romance had a policy where they couldn't accept payments from credit or debit cards, probably because they didn't want to pay processing fees. We asked what on earth Bride was thinking by not telling us what kind of party this was. She said, quote, "If I told you, then none of you would show up." She also assumed that if we thought we were going to a club, especially one of the strip variety, we would bring a lot more than $50, which none of us did. Bride then burst into tears, berating us for being cheapskates, and said that if none of us would buy something right then and there, we were all uninvited to her wedding. Most of us were in her wedding party, so that meant the bridesmaids would be out hundreds of dollars on their bridal party stuff, like the shoes, dress, jewelry, etc. And one of us was her wedding photographer, who would lose out on that job. Are you really telling me right now that she's like, if you don't buy one of these Pure Romance products, then you're out of the wedding, like cut off? This sounds like an episode of Bridezilla's. Have you seen this show? Okay, I don't know if this show airs anymore, but this is a whole like reality TV show about brides who are just awful and their expectations are way too high. They're cutting out people left and right for the stupidest things. It makes for super cringy yet entertaining television, and it sounds like this entire situation would fit in perfectly with that show. She knew what she was doing by deceiving you and telling you that you were coming to a bachelorette party, which maybe it had some components of that, but it was more so a Pure Romance pitch. She even said, if I told you what this really was, nobody would have come, okay? At least she has that understanding, and that is so manipulative, especially when her expectation is so high that everyone is gonna spend money on this stuff so that she can get some kind of benefit from it. This sounds like an absolute Bridezilla nightmare. The bride's mom was in her bedroom the whole time and heard everything that happened. She came out and scolded us all for making her daughter upset and ruining her bachelorette party. Apparently, the bride worked so hard to plan this party, and the least we could do for drinking her booze and wasting the consultant's precious time was pony up and buy something. It was honestly mortifying and surreal for a middle-aged woman to be scolding a room of full-grown adults like we were teenagers. We would have just gone to a club without the bride and happily never saw her again if it weren't for the bridal party and the wedding photographer standing to lose a lot of money. So we all caved and bought stuff against our wills. I literally had to borrow $2 from someone in order to buy the cheapest thing in her inventory, a glow-in-the-dark condom. It cost an outrageous $7, and including sales tax, fees, and the bride's commission, it cost a whopping $22 for a condom. I've never left anywhere feeling as defeated and humiliated as I did then. None of us ever saw the bride again after her wedding, and I genuinely hope that consultant saw this mess and left MLMs for good. She deserved so much better. Thanks for reading. I love your channel and commend the valuable work you do to protect vulnerable people from MLMs. Unfortunately, this isn't the first or last story with MLMs I have, but this one was definitely the most dramatic. Dramatic indeed. And here's what I always think about in these situations that I hear of people having their bridal shower, their baby shower, their bachelorette party, sometimes even their weddings dedicated to MLM pitches, or they have some kind of MLM component to them in which they're expecting that the guests are going to buy something. More than anything, I just feel really sad for them. I feel really sad that they have chosen to incorporate an MLM company into one of the biggest events of their lives. I know not everybody feels this way, but for me personally, I feel like these big events, these showers, these weddings, these are like lifetime milestone moments that ideally you would like to look back on with fondness, with happiness, with warm, fuzzy feelings about how great it was, right? Now is not the time to be looking back on those things and being like, wow, what a disaster that was. And so for that reason, I just feel sad for this person, for your ex-friend, who in that moment thought that this was going to be a good idea to have a pure romance consultant come in and do a sales pitch. I just have to wonder if she looks back on that and regrets it in any kind of way. You can't go back and do that again, I guess, unless you get married again, but was it worth it? In the end, was this worth it? Was the commission or whatever kind of incentive she was going to receive from hosting this party, was that worth sacrificing your whole bachelorette party, making everybody super uncomfortable, threatening to cut people out of your wedding, and ultimately never talking to any of these people again? Was that worth the amount of money or whatever you were going to get as a result of hosting this party? My inclination is to say, no, it probably wasn't worth it. But the damage is done. You can't go back. You can't redo it. And that just makes me feel so sad for her. I'm sure to some degree she does regret it, but it does make for a highly entertaining story. So thank you for sending this one in. This story says, "Hi Hannah, please let me start by saying you're doing great work sharing these stories. I'd prefer to stay anonymous even though I don't think any of the people in the following story know this email. Trigger warning for talk of cancer and funerals. I have a cousin that is estranged from the family. She was raised away from the core of our family and only really visited on major holidays. Once she was old enough to make her own decisions, she stopped visiting on holidays and only came around or even called when she needed something, usually money. When she was nearing 30 and after about 8 years of barely any contact, she popped up out of nowhere touting her new business. It works. She showed up at the family hub with wraps and patches and whatever other nonsense that company peddles and starts crowing about how everything is a miracle and it all works and whatnot. She offers me a free wrap to, quote, lighten up that double chin. Gee, thanks. I haven't even really thought about my double chin till then. And offered my mother, who was suffering with cancer, a patch to put on her stomach to, quote, draw out toxins. My mother declined but was ignored, so I took the hit and I distracted the Hun by accepting the self-esteem destroying wrap. Needless to say, I didn't see a difference after. After the Hun realized I didn't like the wrap and my mother wanted nothing touching her that wasn't curated by a doctor, she gave up and went back home. Cue another year or two of silence. My mother passed due to cancer, and lo and behold, the Hun cousin shows up to her funeral. Here's the true horror story. My father and I were standing in the receiving line, hearing well wishes and whatnot, and then we start seeing business cards clutched in the hands of those coming up. I thought nothing of it because I had bigger things on my mind, but eventually a friend of the family came up and mentioned the woman at the door. The Hun cousin was standing at the door passing out business cards and brochures. Turns out she was telling people that my mother's oncologist had only given her 3 months to live, but because my mother began using It Works wraps, she was able to stay with her family for an additional 1.5 years. I could not believe it. Only wanting to keep things civil kept me from physically throwing her from the building. We haven't spoken since, and I honestly don't know if she's even still trying her new business. I don't really know how to close this out, but thank you for reading and sharing if you do. I don't know how to close this out. You really left us with a cliffhanger here. I feel like I need more context. Like, she really came to your mom's funeral and claimed that your mom was using It Works for 1.5 years, but your mom never used any of the products ever because she declined them a couple years prior. I'm very confused as to why your cousin would think that this is appropriate. Because unless I'm missing something, that's a complete bold-faced lie, right? Your mom never used It Works products ever at all. But your cousin is claiming that it extended her life after her cancer diagnosis? I just don't even know what to say. I'm speechless. That's just completely delusional, is it not? Truly, this is a new low. Your estranged cousin, hearing of the news that her relative has died, and she thinks, bingo, perfect opportunity. I'm gonna show up, I'm gonna pass out business cards, and I'm gonna tell everybody in attendance a complete lie that It Works products extended her life. I truly just cannot wrap my head around this. We've seen some desperate times and some desperate measures coming from people in MLMs to try and sell their products, and some very crafty and creative ideas they have and different things that they'll do, but we have hit rock bottom with this one, I think. Obviously, it's inappropriate, unacceptable, inexcusable. You don't need me to tell you those things. I'm just kind of in disbelief. I can't understand how someone would think of this plan and actually execute it. It baffles me. This one says, "Hi Hannah, I'm a longtime watcher, but have only just now decided to tell my story. Please leave my name out of this video since I will be talking about close family members. Before I jump in, I want to warn you that I'll be discussing my struggle with reproductive health. I understand if you choose not to share. Just a little background, I was raised in a very conservative, highly religious home. I lost my dad when I was young, so my mom relied heavily on our church for support after losing her husband. Just a note, given the circumstances, my mom was doing the best that she knew how. Despite the story I'm about to share, she provided a safe and loving home for my brother and I. I went through puberty at 13 and quickly realized that something wasn't right. I would frequently miss school or have to leave early because of the pain and other symptoms. Finally, at 16, I begged my mom to take me to the doctor, where I was diagnosed with polycystic ovarian syndrome, or PCOS. There is no known cure and it can impact fertility. However, the symptoms can be curbed by taking birth control. The doctor filled my prescription and sent us on our way. Instead of picking up the pills, my mom called my aunt, a high-ranking doTERRA rep who recommended a collection of $500 worth of oils and promised that they would cure my ovaries. Though we couldn't really afford it at the time, my mom ended up purchasing the oils. I was instructed to mix the oils, soak up the mixture into a tampon, and wear the tampon for 8 hours every day until my symptoms improved. Super yikes. Oh my God. Could you imagine what that would feel like? I feel scarred by this recommendation. Could you even imagine? Oh my God. Having that very, very sensitive tissue exposed to undiluted essential oils for 8 hours straight. I'm just laughing uncomfortably because I cannot even fathom what that would do to you. Hello, it's me. Pardon the interruption. I'm here to forewarn and apologize for the fact that the remainder of this video is filmed completely out of focus. I filmed this video this morning, I'm currently editing it, and at some random point in the middle of the video, the camera stops focusing on my face and instead focuses on the lovely plant behind me. I don't know why this happened. I didn't move myself. Literally, the camera just decided that it didn't want to focus on me anymore, and it stayed that way for the remainder of the video. You may not know this about me, but I'm quite quite the perfectionist, if you couldn't tell, and so this really grinds my gears. Like, my stomach dropped when I was editing it and I noticed that this happened. I'm so frustrated by it. I don't know why it happened, but what I can tell you is that it's not going to happen again, because now I know to look out for it and to be paying attention and looking in the viewfinder over here every so often to make sure I'm not out of focus. But if there is an upside, lots of people tell me that they listen to my videos like podcasts and they don't necessarily watch them visually anyway, so hopefully this is not too much of a distraction. In full transparency, I am on the biggest time crunch of my life. I'm at the point right now where I could go into labor at any moment. I just simply do not have the time to go back and refilm this video, so I appreciate you being patient with me. Thank you for your understanding, and let's get back to the story. Naturally, I was wholeheartedly against this idea and frankly terrified. You and me both, sister. I ended up having one of my friends drive me to the pharmacy to pick up the pills every month. I would pretend to use the oils and tampons. However, the oils ended up getting flushed, so you never use them. Oh God, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm so happy to hear that you didn't actually try this. My poor mom would spend $500 every few months to replenish the stash. As expected, because I was taking the birth control, my symptoms improved and I was no longer having to miss school. Elated, my mother told my aunt that the oils had cured the incurable disorder. My aunt told the entire church about my success and convinced quite a few other women to buy this concoction of insanely expensive oil. Looking back now, I feel absolutely terrible that my lie cost my mom and many other women thousands of dollars in hopes of a miracle cure that doesn't exist. Okay, hold on. A couple things wrong with this. Something about the fact that you are a teenager in this story and you are dealing with PCOS. I feel like that information, that piece of medical history is nobody's business other than your own. And perhaps your mom, obviously she's clued into this whole situation. She took you to the doctor, everything like that. But it does not sit right with me that your aunt now goes to church and informs everybody at church about your personal medical history and is telling everybody that you've been using essential oil soaked tampons to cure this kind of thing. That to me, just on like a basic human level, that is such a violation of your privacy and I cannot get behind that. But obviously she would do that in the name of promoting her doTERRA business and her oils and what she believes they have the ability to do. So that's her motive and I understand that. But I just feel like on a basic respect level, this is so not okay to be doing. But the fact that she has doTERRA oils to sell really gives you some insight into her motive for doing that. And the second issue is now that she's gone around and spread the misinformation to all the ladies at church that using essential oils in this way can cure PCOS, who knows what those ladies did with that information, right? Just because you didn't actually follow through with that advice doesn't mean that they aren't gonna follow through with that advice. And to be clear, I don't think you should be blamed for that. I can understand how that would make you feel bad in hindsight, but you had no way of knowing that your aunt was gonna take that piece of advice, spread it around to everybody else at church, and leave them to their own devices to see what they're gonna do with that information. This is just bad news from all angles. Flash forward to today, I'm 29 years old, and after some struggles and medical assistance, I am about midway through my first pregnancy. Congratulations! Being excited, I shared my ultrasound pictures with my family. To my horror, I opened up Facebook to see a post from my aunt that includes my ultrasound picture with a caption claiming that doTERRA is the reason I conceived. I called her and fessed up to the lies about using the oils and asked her to take the post down. She became very heated and angry with me. However, she did take the post down. I hope over the coming weeks we can reconcile. Anyway, that's my horror story. Thanks for all that you do and congrats on the baby. Again, your aunt is crossing a line of privacy. That ultrasound picture is not hers to share, first and foremost, unless she has explicit permission from you to take a piece of your medical photos. Because think about it, that's what it is. That is a photo of the inside of your body, and that is your child on that photo. Unless she has explicit permission from you to take it and to post it on her own social media, that is not okay to be doing in the first place. And secondly, again, claiming that that doTERRA oils played a role in your conception is also so upsetting. What I am happy to see is that you did fess up about all of this and that you let her know after all this time, hey, did you know that I never used your oils once for anything? So therefore, you cannot be claiming that they helped me conceive or that they helped cure my PCOS, because I never touched them. I lied. I can see how that would be infuriating to her all this time later, because no doubt she probably relied on your story and your personal testimony in a lot of her sales pitches and in bolstering her beliefs about what her oils can do. And what it really comes down to is we have to remember that a lot of the claims that are made about MLM products are not rooted in evidence or fact or research. They are often rooted only on people's personal testimonies. And in your case, you're kind of showing us how sometimes those personal testimonies can be completely false. They can be total lies. Not because you had that malicious intent to lie, not because you were trying to mislead people, but it really does go to show how this is all just one big game of telephone. Like, you're telling your aunt one thing and then she's going forward and telling other people about your experience, and then so on and so on and so on. And that is the only basis for these product claims. No doubt your aunt went to her teammates and was like, hey, using oils in this way helped my niece with her polycystic ovarian syndrome. And now her teammates are taking that piece of information, they're noting it, and now maybe they're going to reference that down the road. Maybe they're going to make a post about how this helped this one person in this one way. Maybe they're going to regurgitate that experience over and over and over again, and it just keeps going down the line. But if you trace it all the way back to the source, it was a complete lie in the first place. I think your story is a fantastic reminder that we should always be taking these product claims with a grain of salt. Raise an eyebrow, look at that skeptically, be like, I don't know about this. This seems a little bit far-fetched. And if your only source is so-and-so's relative's personal testimony, like, it's probably not that rock solid. We probably should not be putting too much weight on that personal testimony, but people in MLMs do. They grasp at straws. They grasp onto anything and everything to make it appear like their products have the power to do things that they're not actually proven to do. I'm so happy to hear that you did not use the oils in this way on yourself. I also want to congratulate you on the baby, and I'm hoping that everything is going smoothly. And I also love to hear that eventually your aunt now knows the truth. Hopefully she can stop perpetuating this misinformation. Maybe in some cases the damage is already done from that, but I'm hoping that she won't continue to go forward claiming that her doTERRA oils have the power to cure PCOS. This story says, hi Hannah, I recently came across your content and wanted to share my MLM experience. Mine was pretty harmless compared to some of the other experiences I've watched you read on your channel. Luckily, I came out of these interactions unharmed. My unfortunate interaction happened when I was a sophomore in college in 2008 or 2009. My RA held a Mary Kay party as her required monthly event, and me being new to the adult world and living on my own, decided to attend. And I just feel compelled to define what an RA is. I know I have a lot of international viewers, or maybe there's people watching that never stayed in a dorm, so they don't know what an RA is, but it stands for resident advisor. Typically an older student who kind of watches over that dorm or a certain floor of a dorm. When I was at college, my dorm building had 6 floors and each floor had its own RA. And they kind of feel like your guardian or like your parental figure almost. Like you can go to them if there's something going on in the dorm. They're there to kind of check in on you, make sure that things aren't getting too rowdy, whatever. They oftentimes host events to get everybody in the building together and foster a community or something. So that seems like what's happening here is your resident advisor of your college dorm was hosting a Mary Kay party as one of her required monthly events, meaning that people in the dorm building were expected to go to this. Maybe everybody watching already knows that. I didn't know what an RA was until I got to college, so just to give some background on this dynamic of what's happening in this story here. I thought, what's the worst that can happen? I can help my friend with her monthly meeting requirements and maybe see some nice products. I was familiar with Mary Kay because my grandmother had always had their products in her house, but at that time I had no idea what an MLM was. I attended the party and the seller raved the entire time about how great the products were, how we could host parties for free makeovers and swag, and we would have the best skin ever if we used her products. As hormonal young adults, clear skin is a big win. Also, to be clear, it sounds like your RA was not the Mary Kay Hun herself. It sounds like she brought brought in a Mary Kay rep to do this presentation for this event that she was hosting. Additionally, she kept telling us if we hosted our own party, we would get a free makeover and some free makeup. She had a contest to win a bag of sample products if you answered questions and got tickets from her for a drawing. One girl at the party was getting so into answering these questions for the samples that she was yelling at other girls and getting in their faces for answering questions faster than her. Yeah, she won the stupid sample gift bag. After the party, my friend and I asked the Mary Kay lady if we could host a party for our friends. Obviously, we didn't know any better, for a free makeover and free makeup. Some side information that's important to the story is that my friend and I were both very poor. We were scholarship kids attending a private and extremely expensive college, so we didn't have any wiggle room for extra purchases. We ended up setting a date to host the party. My friend and I made a Facebook event to invite people, and we reserved a place at our college where we could have the party. The day came and we got our free makeovers before the party. The plan was for us to be her examples of the products for when our friends arrived. My friend and I both hated our makeover. I think this lady either didn't know how to use the products she was selling or just didn't care. I honestly believe she used every product she had regardless of whether she created a cohesive look or not, just to display her products. Anyway, we asked about our free makeup, and that's when she told us that we only got free stuff if our friends bought a certain amount of products. This was never told to us beforehand, and when I politely reminded her that that wasn't part of our agreement, she went crazy. She started yelling at us, saying that we were wasting her time and that she should have known better than to do another college party after no one bought anything at the last party. Sorry, Karen, for being on a fixed income. I should have told her to get lost after this first interaction, but I was too much of an anxious person at the time. Now I would have loved every minute. Well, our friends arrived for the party, and my friend group was and still is very diverse. We had people from different ethnicities, genders, gender identities, and sexual orientations. This is only important to know because of what came next. Mary Kay Karen went on a second tirade because, quote, she can't sell makeup to people with dark skin tones, and, quote, males shouldn't wear makeup. There was more, but it was so bad I don't want to write it. My favorite was when a good friend of mine who happened to be a cis male asked for products that could help his acne. He was dead serious and ready to buy because he couldn't find products that helped. She yelled at him saying, quote, Mary Kay is only for women who want to show they have class. I don't need you to buy anything. Yeah, she was awful. Awful indeed. This woman sounds like a walking nightmare. And since when is skincare only for women? That's what I want to know. Everybody has skin. Somebody's gender or gender identity should have no impact on their ability to purchase and use skincare, okay? Everybody can get acne. Everybody can have a need for these kinds of products. And the fact that she's discriminating against this guy because he's a guy and because she doesn't like to sell skincare to men is very bizarre. And don't even get me started on the fact that she says that she can't sell makeup to people with dark skin tones. Obviously, very problematic statement to be making. And that has me wondering what the Mary Kay shade range is. Because unfortunately, there are some brands out there that do not cater to darker skin tones, which is problematic in itself, right? So I'm looking it up right now. I wonder what the shade range is for Mary Kay makeup, because it very well could be that the company doesn't even sell products for darker skin tones, in which case that would be an issue rooted within Mary Kay as a company. And as I'm looking right now, they do not have an inclusive shade range. Not at all. I'll post the webpage that I'm looking at right now. This is their Time-Wise Luminous Foundation. As you can see, most of these shades are catered towards light skin tones. There's only a handful that are catered towards dark skin tones. That's a problem. Mary Kay needs to get their act together on that one. But in the case of this party specifically, I'm wondering, because Mary Kay is an inventory-based MLM, at least it used to be. The primary way that Mary Kay products are sold is that the Mary Kay reps themselves have their own product on hand to sell you in person. And it's their responsibility to purchase that inventory and to have it on hand and to lug it around and to be able to give it to somebody, handing it off person to person. They're not necessarily directing people to a website to purchase things from. Maybe in this day and age, they are moving more towards the online space. But when did your story take place? 2008? Yeah, I feel like in 2008, 2009, it was still pretty common that people and Mary Kay purchased their own inventory and that's what they took to parties. So that could tell you a lot about what shades that particular Mary Kay rep chooses to carry on hand. And the fact that she's saying that she can't sell product to people with darker skin tones, that signals to me that she chooses as a Mary Kay rep not to buy inventory in darker shades. So therefore she wouldn't have it in her bag to be able to give you. Also problematic, okay? I think there are two entities we need to blame. Number one, blame Mary Kay for not having an inclusive shade range and effectively excluding a significant population of people from being able to buy their products. And secondly, the blame can be placed on this particular Mary Kay rep because she chooses not to carry those limited shades. It really does seem like, based on the words that she's saying, that she only likes to sell to white women, which, yikes, lady, not a great look. She finished her tirade at 15 young college adults, packed up her stuff, and just left. We all sat there stunned and offended at her behavior. I told my RA about what happened and she was so angry. Apparently, Mary Kay Karen was her aunt, and my RA was embarrassed by Karen's behavior. Karen was banned from coming back to the college, and MLM parties were also banned. I'm not sure if the ban is still around, but it was in effect until at least 2011 when I graduated. After this interaction, I've been educating myself on MLMs, and I'm so glad I found your channel. You fulfill an important role in educating the public about how awful these companies are and the ways that they prey on vulnerable people. I want to think that Mary Kay Karen wasn't really as terrible as she acted, and maybe she was trapped in the MLM cult and felt desperate. All these years later, I hope she got out and is living her best life. Man, yeah, this story is cringy. I do think to an extent that people who get involved with MLMs are victims, and they are, you could say, taught or trained or brainwashed to act in a certain way that they believe is going to be beneficial for their business. And sometimes that means that they are going to say or do things that they wouldn't otherwise do because they feel the pressure of having to make sales. But personally, in this case, I feel like this woman maybe had her own biases that she needs to work through, and that not all of the blame can be placed on the brainwashing of the cult that is Mary Kay or something. Her words and actions are obviously very offensive and inexcusable, but her lashing out in that way could have been rooted in frustration, in the sense that she has now wasted all this time coming to this party and hosting it for all these college kids that don't intend to buy anything and whatever. On one hand, I do see her as a victim of the MLM business model and the fact that it's really difficult to make sales, and I can understand how that would be frustrating, but I also think that she needs to be held accountable for her own actions and her own words and the way that she is reacting to those feelings that she's having. And in this case, those kinds of comments are inexcusable and highly inappropriate, and I feel the need to apologize on her behalf. I guess if there's a bright side to your story, because I always try to leave it on like an uplifting note, is that you didn't necessarily know what MLMs were at the time, but this left such a bad taste in your mouth that you went forward to try and figure out what the heck is going on with this kind of thing. And I also like to hear that your college campus banned MLM parties. That's great. I wish that could happen on all college campuses. I think that would be amazing. And if I remember right, you said you were at like some smaller private college where it may have been easier to implement and enforce that kind of thing. But good on your college for having an MLM ban. I love to hear that. I think that's great. This one says, "Hey Hannah, I've been watching your videos and I have a story that I've always wanted to share, and you're the perfect outlet to share it with. So thank you. I would appreciate it if you don't use my real name in your videos. I've always been staunchly anti-MLM. MLMs are not too common in my circles, thankfully, but I've had enough encounters with them through the years that I've always known to be wary. My first encounter was in college when my friend's mom invited us to a Leah Sophia party, and without even knowing anything about MLMs at the time, I found the experience so predatory and I left with the worst taste in my mouth. The horror story that I'm writing to you about, though, happened a few years later. In my 20s, I was making a living teaching piano lessons in my students' homes. I had one family whose kids had been my students for 3 or 4 years at the time, and I knew this mom to be somewhat problematic. One day, I got to the house and the kids were upstairs and I was settling in the living room waiting for them to come down. Suddenly, the mom walks in and starts chatting away, asking me about my personal life. As we were talking, I noticed she was kind of blatantly rubbing something all over her neck. neck. We kept talking and she's rubbing it all over her wrists, smelling it, rubbing it behind her ears, and I realized that she's doing this in an obvious way to try and get me to ask what it is. Having figured out what was happening, I tried to ignore it until she finally started talking about her Young Living business, how essential oils have completely changed her life and how she knows how stressed I've been, which she had just manipulated me into divulging, and how much I could benefit from essential oils. Mind you, we're 10 minutes into the lesson time and the kids are nowhere to be seen. Now, I'm not at all interested in essential oils. They've never been my thing. But in any case, I do have a friend who's kind of into them. She buys them at her local health food store, not an MLM. And if I ever did become interested, I could ask her for recommendations and buy them on my own. I told the mom pretty firmly that no, I wasn't interested and I certainly didn't have the extra money to spend at that time. I thought it was so tacky to be having this conversation with a paying client of mine. She knew that I was young and single and supporting myself in a very expensive area by teaching piano lessons, and she should have known that I was not someone she should have been trying to make a sale to, but she didn't back off. For the rest of that school year, every week I would get to her house and she would be sitting there waiting for me to tell about the new oil she had in stock or the deal she had on a diffuser. She had that thing running 24/7 and I would leave every week with a headache and mild nausea. She seemed to have no interest in ever talking about her children's lessons, their progress, their practice, but she was always ready to pounce on me about her stupid essential oils. I would stand there every week waiting for her to write my little check so that I could leave to rush to the next lesson, which I would inevitably be late to because of her. I always repeated, "I'm sorry, I'm really not interested or able to afford this at this time, but I'll let you know if anything changes." I look back at this and I'm even more disgusted now than I was then. This was clearly predatory. This woman should have been ashamed of trying to take advantage of someone who was clearly in a more vulnerable position. The fact that she spent all that time pitching a sale to me but didn't seem to care about her kids' lessons made this particularly horrifying. I cringed every time I walked into that house, and I even thought of dropping them, but I couldn't afford the loss of income of even one student per week, and I also didn't want to punish the kids who were great students and enjoyed their lessons. This was over 5 years ago. I don't teach lessons anymore, but she still occasionally invites me to a Young Living event on Facebook. One time I saw a Facebook post of hers with a picture of her sleeping son saying that she was so grateful for Young Living for curing his asthma. So dangerous and so sad. Interestingly, a few years later, I had another student whose mom was trying to sell me Herbalife. This mom was possibly even more pushy than the Young Living mom, but luckily I usually taught that family on a day when only the dad was home, and that student didn't last long in lessons anyway. But these people should really be ashamed of themselves for taking advantage of people who are in a more vulnerable position. I don't think these people realize that the more you push something onto a person, the less likely they are to want it. I was never gonna buy her nasty Herbalife crap, but I sure would have driven off and gotten myself a delicious smoothie at the smoothie shop down the street. Gosh, yeah, I agree that this definitely feels like they're taking advantage of somebody in a vulnerable position. Not only financially, right? You've expressed to them, "I'm sorry, I can't really afford it right now. I'll let you know if I can or if I change my mind." So not only financially vulnerable, but also just like physically vulnerable in that setting. The fact that you are in their home to teach their kids and that they are paying you to be there to provide a service to them. And in a sense, I'm sure that that makes you feel kind of trapped, and that's a whole extra level of vulnerability. I'm sure that you felt like you couldn't just get up and walk out the door, right? Because you're there to teach piano lessons to the kids. And it's not the kids' fault either. They shouldn't be punished because mommy's over here being really pushy about her oils kind of thing. And you probably also feel like you can't leave because you need that money. This is your job. You can't drop them as a client because that will impact your income. So all of this kind of swirled together makes for the perfect storm of them essentially taking advantage of the fact that they have you as a trapped and captive audience, and you know that you can't really leave. So they're taking that opportunity week after week after week to continually push these products on you. That's not cool. That's obviously not respectful. And you're right that the more a person pushes something on you, the less you're going to want to buy it, right? At least just speaking for myself, I could see myself becoming defiant just to become defiant, just to hold my stance and not back down. Like, I've already told you what my intentions are, and I've already given you my boundaries and I've told you that I'm not interested. And if you're going to continually push my boundaries and try and break me down, then I'm going to push back. Even if I did want the oils, I'm certainly not going to buy them from you now, that kind of thing. I just can't really understand from their perspective how they think that this is a good tactic. You have to wonder how often this actually works for them, because if I had to guess, I would say that it doesn't work very often. It's not very likely that their tactics of being incredibly pushy on people and backing them into a corner actually works and actually results in a sale. And with that, those are all the stories I have for you for this MLM horror stories video. You know the drill. If you have your own, please don't hesitate to send it to me. You can find the instructions in the description box down below. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you, and I'll see you in my next one real soon.